She laughed when he spun her. I mean, really laughed. Head tilted, eyes closed. That deep kind of laugh she used to save for late-night kitchen slow dances with me. Now it was his. The DJ shifted into something bass-heavy and stupid. People around them screamed like teenagers at a county fair. And she stayed in his arms like I wasn't even breathing 15 feet away. Just a guy holding 2 empty glasses and a jacket she didn't want anymore. I didn't move. Not when he tucked her hair behind her ear. Not when she leaned in to say something that made him grin like he already knew how the night would end. But when she turned, eyes swept across the room and landed on me for half a second. I smiled. One of those dead smiles. The kind you give when you're in a burning building and nobody notices the smoke. Then I clapped. 3 times. Slow. Loud. It cracked through the music like a gunshot in a church. She froze. He didn't. That's when I walked away. No coat. No goodbye. No explanation. 10 steps out the door and my phone buzzed. Her name. Again. And again. And then a voice behind me I hadn't heard like that in years. Lowell. Please don't. Just wait. Too late. I had already decided. This wasn't going to end the way she thought it would. This time, I would let the silence answer for me. I didn't stop walking until I hit the edge of the gravel lot, where the rented string lights didn't quite reach and the air smelled like pine and old rain. I could still hear the music behind me, that steady thump of someone else's perfect night. I wondered if anyone inside had noticed. If anyone had whispered, "Where'd he go?" Or "Why did he clap like that?" But deep down, I already knew the answer. No one noticed wallpaper when it peeled. Except her. The calls didn't stop, one after the other. I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen until it dimmed. Her contact photo was still a picture from last summer. She was holding a sunflower bigger than her head, smiling with her eyes closed, and I had thought, stupidly, that I'd married someone soft. Someone who didn't know how to bury knives behind laughter. She texted next. "I'm sorry. Please, just talk to me." Then again, "You misunderstood." And finally, "Don't make a scene. We can fix this." That last one nearly made me laugh out loud. I was making a scene? After watching her rub shoulders with a man who looked at her like I'd already died? I should have gone home. But I didn't. I sat on the hood of a stranger's car like a ghost watching the wake. That's when I noticed her heels clacking against the pavement. Fast. Angry. Terrified. "Lowell," she called out, breath catching like she'd run the whole way. "Please don't leave. Let me explain." I didn't look at her. Instead, I asked, "How long has he known?" She blinked. "What? How long has Nathan known I wouldn't be a problem?" There it was. The tiny twitch in her jaw. The fractional pause. Not shock. Not denial. Just the wrong kind of silence. "You're overreacting," she muttered. It wasn't like that. I finally turned to her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like apologizing for existing. "You looked at him like you wished I'd disappear," I said, my voice low and cold. "And when I did, you looked scared. Not guilty. Scared. That wasn't regret. That was damage control." Her lip trembled. She took a step closer, arms half raised, like I was a wounded dog she didn't want to startle. It didn't mean anything. "You looked happy." That broke her. Something in her face, a twitch of pain, of truth, of real fear, cracked through the perfect party makeup. And then, softly, she whispered, "You weren't supposed to come tonight." I stared at her. The music was still going inside. People were probably dancing, toasting, pretending everything good was permanent. But outside, in the shadows, my wife had just admitted something far worse than cheating. She hadn't just erased me from her night. She'd tried to erase me from the picture entirely. And suddenly, I wasn't sure I wanted to know what would have happened if I hadn't shown up at all. Her last words, "You weren't supposed to come tonight," kept looping in my head like a glitch. I stared at her under the dim glow of the parking lot light, watching the gloss on her lips catch the orange hue. And for the first time since we'd been together, I didn't see my wife. I saw a stranger who had just confessed to building a world without me in it. She reached for me, but I stepped back, not dramatically, just enough so she felt the space. She kept talking, voice trembling but quick, like she was trying to unload a secret before someone else came outside. "It's not what you think," she said, but her eyes darted toward the ballroom doors as if she was expecting someone. Maybe Nathan, maybe someone worse. That's when I realized my invitation hadn't come from her. It had come from her cousin. She hadn't told me to stay home, but she also hadn't told me she'd arranged something here without me. I asked quietly. What was supposed to happen if I didn't show up? And she flinched like I'd hit her. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked. It was just a dance, Lowell. But I wasn't looking at her mouth. I was looking at her hands, how they were clenching and unclenching, the way she kept wiping her palms on her dress like she'd touched something she couldn't wash off. The music inside shifted to a slow song and people cheered, but out here the air was heavy, still. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't her name. It was an unknown number. A message popped up. We're ready when she is. No punctuation, no name. Just that. My stomach dropped. I turned the screen toward her. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, then filled with tears so fast it almost looked rehearsed. She whispered, delete it. Not what is that? Not who is that? Just delete it. My voice shook, but stayed low. Why would someone be ready for you if this was just a dance? She didn't answer. She pressed her hands to her forehead and started pacing, her heels digging into the gravel like she could stomp the truth back underground. You don't understand, she said finally, voice breaking. It wasn't supposed to go like this. That's when I realized there was no going back to the reception, no smiling through speeches, no pretending to be the quiet husband who fades into the wallpaper. Something much bigger than a dance was unfolding, and she had been counting on me not being there to see it. She looked up at me one more time, eyes wild, mascara starting to streak, and said in a voice that wasn't hers anymore, if you love me, you'll get in the car and drive. Don't ask where. Don't ask why. Just drive. And right then, with my heart pounding, I had to decide if I was still the man who carried her cardigan and looked away, or if I was finally going to ask the question that could burn everything down. I should have said no. I should have turned around, walked to the edge of that gravel lot, ordered a ride, and left her standing there with her mess unraveling around her. But instead, I nodded. Maybe it was muscle memory. Maybe it was weakness. Or maybe it was some twisted instinct that if I kept driving, I'd eventually find the version of her I used to know. The girl who used to bring me coffee at work just because. So I unlocked the car and slid into the driver's seat. She got in beside me without a word, pulled the door shut, and didn't even look at me. Just stared out the windshield like a soldier who'd already seen too much. I started driving. We didn't speak for 10 minutes. The wedding venue faded behind us, swallowed by trees and fog. Finally, I asked, where are we going? She didn't answer right away, just tapped her fingers on her knee like a metronome. Eventually she said, just keep heading north. I'll tell you when to turn. The road curved through wooded backroads, the kind where cell phone signal dies and headlights barely cut the dark. She finally spoke again, softer this time. I didn't cheat on you, Lowell. Not in the way you think. I kept my eyes on the road, but said, there's more than one way to cheat. She nodded, like she'd been waiting for me to say that. It wasn't about sex. It was about leverage. What kind of leverage? I asked, suddenly aware of how tight I was gripping the wheel. She took a shaky breath. There's a deal happening. Something with the company. I didn't mean to get pulled in, but they found out things. About my family. My dad. I owed them. Who's they? She looked at me then. Really looked. And I swear to God there was something in her face I had never seen before. Not guilt. Not shame. Fear. The kind that doesn't blink. You remember when I told you Nathan was just a coworker? She asked. I nodded slowly. He's not. He's not even supposed to work there. He was placed. Placed by who? But she went silent again. Just stared out the window like she regretted every mile we were putting between us and the ballroom. I pulled over onto a turnout by a ditch and killed the engine. The silence was deafening. You need to start talking, I said, voice shaking now. Because I'm beginning to think you didn't come out to that parking lot to stop me. You came out to use me. She flinched like I'd slapped her. You're not wrong, she whispered. But you were the only one I could trust not to ask questions. Well, I said, laughing bitterly, bad news. I'm asking all of them. That's when she reached into her clutch and pulled out something I hadn't seen her carry before, a small silver USB stick, taped over with a single piece of masking tape. No label. No markings. She held it out to me like it was radioactive. They're looking for this, she said, and they think I don't have it. I stared at it without reaching for it. My hand suddenly felt useless. What's on it? I asked. She looked away. Enough to bury the people who were at that wedding tonight, including Nathan. And why me? I asked louder now. Why bring me into this? Why smile at him like I didn't exist, and then run after me the second I left? She looked back at me, and for once, she didn't dodge. Because you're the only one who wouldn't sell me out. And that's when it hit me. This whole thing hadn't been about betrayal. At least, not just betrayal of me. It was about survival. And I'd just unknowingly agreed to be her getaway driver. I didn't take the USB. I just stared at it sitting there on the center console like it had teeth. Kelsey didn't push it into my hand, either. She just let it rest between us, breathing fast, like the thing might explode if she looked at it too long. I leaned back in my seat, trying to think. But how do you think straight when everything you thought you knew about your life has been bent into some kind of surveillance thriller nightmare? 10 hours earlier, I was adjusting my tie in the mirror, hoping she'd think I looked sharp. Now I was parked in the middle of nowhere with a woman who looked like my wife, but talked like she was being hunted. I started the car again, not because I wanted to move, but because staying still felt worse. She didn't give me directions this time. Just sat there chewing her thumbnail, eyes darting from side to side like she was expecting headlights to come screaming around the bend at any second. We drove in silence for 15 more minutes until we saw a gas station glowing in the distance. It was one of those run-down, family-owned ones with flickering fluorescent lights and an ice machine that buzzed like it was dying. "I need water," she muttered. I pulled in and parked near the edge of the lot, not directly under the lights. She got out quickly and disappeared inside. I sat there gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles popped. That's when I saw him. A man standing by the payphone. Red windbreaker. Hood up. Face half hidden. Just standing. Not smoking. Not talking. Just standing with one hand in his pocket and the other resting lightly on the payphone like he was waiting for it to ring. He wasn't there when we pulled in. I know he wasn't. But he was there now. I watched him from the mirror, the kind of watching where you don't move your head because you don't want to draw attention. He didn't shift. Didn't look over. Just stood there like he knew we'd be stopping here eventually. Kelsey came back out with a bottle of water and a pack of gum. She paused the moment she stepped outside. She saw him too. She walked faster than before, climbed back into the car, and slammed the door shut. "Drive," she said. "Who is he?" "I don't know," she said too quickly. "Try again." "I said I don't know," she snapped, then caught herself and lowered her voice. We need to keep moving. Please, Lowell." But I didn't drive. I looked back at the payphone. He was gone. I opened the door. She grabbed my arm. "No, I'm not just going to. Lowell, listen to me. If you go looking for answers tonight, you're not going to like what you find." That scared me more than anything else. Because she didn't say it like a threat. She said it like a promise. And that meant whatever this was, whatever was on that USB, we weren't just hiding anymore. We were being hunted. I shut the door and drove. But I couldn't shake it. The man in the red windbreaker. The missing context. The way she watched every car behind us like it might sprout fangs. And suddenly, I wasn't wondering if she'd cheated. I was wondering if she'd dragged me into something that could kill us both. We drove for hours. Neither of us said a word. The only sounds were the hum of the tires and the occasional crackle of gravel when we drifted too close to the shoulder. I watched the road, but my mind was spiraling somewhere else. Replaying the man at the payphone, the masked terror in Kelsey's voice, and the silver USB still resting quietly in the cup holder like a loaded weapon no one wanted to touch. I wasn't even sure where we were heading anymore. Some highway I'd never been on. Exit signs for towns I'd never heard of. For all I knew, we were driving in circles. Eventually, around 3 a.m., she told me to take the next exit. "There's a rest stop a few miles ahead," she said, barely above a whisper. "We can figure things out there." I nodded, though every part of me was screaming. Rest stops. In the middle of the night. With a terrified woman and a mystery drive that began after a fake wedding dance. I pulled in slowly, parked in the farthest corner, engine running. There were two other cars, one truck with fogged windows and a small silver sedan with no plates. Kelsey didn't move. She stared straight ahead, hands folded like she was praying. Then someone knocked on her window. She gasped, actually yelped, and pulled away from the glass. I reached for the glove compartment, even though there was nothing in there but expired registration papers and an old pair of sunglasses. The man standing outside her window didn't flinch. He raised both hands, palms open. No threat, just eerie calm. Kelsey rolled down the window half an inch. "You're late," the man said. That voice. I recognized it instantly. I didn't want to, but I did. Brent, the guy from her office who was barely part of the department and probably quitting soon. The one she swore was awkward and harmless. He didn't look awkward now. He looked like a handler collecting a runaway. You said you wouldn't follow us, she snapped. You said you'd deliver it by midnight, he countered. She looked at me, just briefly, then back at Brent. I didn't think I'd need backup, she said. That one sentence broke me. Backup? I wasn't her husband anymore. I was her insurance policy. Brent leaned down, eyes on me now. Calm, cold, not angry, not smug, just calculating. I assume you've seen the drive, he said. I didn't respond. My grip on the wheel tightened until my knuckles went pale. She didn't tell you what's on it, did she? He continued, voice like a parent explaining fire to a toddler. It's not some corporate scandal. It's names, logs, travel manifests, digital receipts tied to people with very expensive secrets. Kelsey reached for the window controls, but Brent pressed his hand against the glass and said one last thing before stepping back. Keeping it is dangerous, but knowing about it, that's worse. He walked back toward the silver sedan, got in, drove off without headlights. Kelsey was crying now, not sobbing, just silent tears sliding down her cheeks. Her hands were clenched in her lap. The water bottle had tipped over between her feet. I finally spoke. You told me it was about your father, about debts, about leverage. You didn't tell me we were sitting on a blackmail nuke. She looked at me, wet-faced, miserable, and completely cornered. I didn't think they'd come after you, she whispered. I shook my head slowly, voice low and cracking. They didn't come after me, Kelsey. I turned off the engine. They came because of me. We didn't leave the rest stop right away. I sat there, heart thudding like a drum wrapped in wet cloth, barely registering the condensation building up on the windshield. Kelsey didn't say a word. She stared down at her knees, breathing through her mouth, hands pressed between her thighs like she was trying to keep herself from coming apart. I wanted to yell, to scream, to ask her how long. How long she'd known this wasn't just some dance with a coworker. How long she'd let me think I was just insecure, needy, pathetic, when in reality, I'd been sitting beside a detonator this entire time. But I didn't yell. I asked a single question, calmly, evenly, like I was reading it off a script someone else had written. Why did Brent say knowing was worse than having? She closed her eyes. Not to think. To delay. Then she said, because some of the names, they're connected to projects. Surveillance contracts. Black sites. Things your firm audited, Lowell. That knocked the wind out of me. I blinked hard. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I worked in compliance. My job, the same job Kelsey had always called boring but safe, was to review audits, security architecture, back-end logistics. But nothing I'd ever seen looked even remotely like what she was describing. My voice cracked when I asked, you think I gave them something? She shook her head slowly. Not directly. You're clean. But someone used your login credentials a year ago. Just once. And whoever it was, they downloaded internal files tied to encrypted third-party contracts. Your name was on the access log. I know. That's what scared them. My entire body felt cold. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, and stared ahead at the blinking fluorescent sign over the bathrooms like it could anchor me to reality. You're saying I've been marked? I said. You were marked the moment they realized you didn't even know what you gave away. And you? Where do you fit into this? She finally looked at me, and this time, her face wasn't scared. It wasn't even sad. It was tired, hollowed out, like someone who had been running for too long and finally stopped. I took the drive to protect you. I laughed bitterly. That's why you flirted with Nathan on a dance floor? Why you let me stand there like a houseplant while you ran whatever game this was? You don't understand, she snapped. The wedding was a handoff. I wasn't supposed to be with you anymore, Lowell. That would have made things simpler. But I couldn't do it. Not after what they threatened. What did they threaten? She looked down. They said you'd have a heart attack at your desk. Natural causes. No autopsy. I felt the blood drain from my face. She reached for my hand. I pulled away. I know I should have told you, she whispered. But I didn't know who was listening. Or watching. Or reading this exact conversation as we're having it. The silence afterward felt like drowning. I reached for the USB. I held it in my palm. It was warm, from the heat of the car, or maybe just my own rising pulse. One thought repeated in my head. If I hand this over, I disappear. If I keep it, I burn. I looked at her and said quietly, you should have let me be the wallpaper. She didn't cry this time. She just nodded. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't the extra in this story. I was the loose thread. and someone out there was already pulling. I didn't sleep that night. We parked behind an abandoned feed store just off Route 89, the kind of place with sun-bleached wood and broken signage half swallowed by weeds. I stayed in the driver's seat, gripping that USB like it was some cursed artifact that might scream if I dropped it. Kelsey curled up in the passenger seat, knees to her chest, jacket pulled over her like a shield. She didn't speak, and neither did I. Not because there wasn't more to say, but because we both knew the damage had already been done. By morning, we were silent in a different way. Not the silence of fear, not grief, something else. The stillness that comes after everything finally breaks and nothing is left to hold up. I drove her to the train station at her request. She didn't say where she was going. I didn't ask. She had a bag packed, one I hadn't noticed in the back seat the entire night, which meant she'd planned this part long before the dance floor, before the wine, before Brent, before the slow clap that broke her smile. She stood on the platform for a moment, clutching her ticket with white knuckles. Then she looked at me and said, "I know I don't get to ask for forgiveness." I said nothing. "But I want you to know," she continued, voice tight. "You were always the safest part of my life. That's why they had to get you out of it." She stepped forward. I thought she might hug me. She didn't. Just brushed her fingers along my sleeve and whispered, "Don't keep it. Don't become them." The train arrived, and just like that, she was gone. I sat in the car for nearly an hour afterward, staring at the people coming and going. Normal people, backpacks, luggage, lattes, a teenage couple making out like the world couldn't touch them. I envied them, not for their ignorance, but for how lightly they existed. Then I drove, not to the cops, not to the press, not to Brent's people or hers. I drove to the edge of the lake. There was a bridge there I used to bike across in college. I parked halfway, stepped out into the cool morning wind, and looked out across the water. In that moment, I understood what the USB really was, not just a drive, not just evidence. It was a fork in the road. I could give it to someone, pick a side, start a war I didn't understand, with people who wouldn't hesitate to bury me the second it suited them. Or I could let it go, choose peace, obscurity, and finally, the life I'd thought I had. I dropped the USB into the water. It didn't make a splash. It just vanished, a quiet plunk, swallowed by something deeper than me. A month later, I moved. New city, new job, small apartment, no windows facing the street. Sometimes I catch myself looking over my shoulder, flinching at unmarked cars, hesitating when I use my credit card. But mostly, I feel light. No more late-night texts. No more frozen glances across a party floor. No more pretending not to notice the way her smile shifted when she looked at anyone else. And now, when I look in the mirror, I finally see a man who stopped trying to be wallpaper. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just free.